In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a pinch pot sphere, and I'm going to demonstrate two different methods. So that's my other piece of clay. We'll come on to that in a moment. I'm just going to push it out of the way and a wet paper towel to keep it damp. I have a ball of clay. This one is about the size of a decent satsuma, maybe a small orange, and that's what I'm going to begin with. Now, to get it into a ball, all I've done is I've cupped it in my hands and I've slapped it into shape. And you can see now this hand is cupped, and you can see where it's wet because the rest of my hand is covered in clay and that bit is damp. And this allows me to get quite a good shape. In this first method, we're going to create two pinch pots and then we're going to join them with a coil. So you're going to need your tongue depressor stick for this. You want each half to be exactly the same size, otherwise it's not half, is it? Make sure that my piece of clay is flat, and then I'm just going to push down. Now look how easily like that goes through. That's actually easier than a knife through butter, especially if your butter is from out of the fridge. And holding these, I can feel they're about the same weight, which is what I want. Now what's handy about this is I already have the shape I need. I'm just going to use a little bit of slip. Remember, slip is clay and water, and it's used as glue, but it's also used just to smooth things down. So I'm just using a tiny bit just to smooth that down. And I want to keep this circular shape because I'm going to make a sphere. So I'm going to make it into a circle, and I'm going to push my thumb into the middle. Now I don't want to go too far, because if I do, then I'll have a really thin bit here, and I want to keep these edges really thick because then they're going to join together really, really well. So what I'm doing is I've got my hand cupped underneath, and I'm using that to provide support for then creating a bowl shape inside. And I'm just using my thumb, and at the moment I'm just sort of smoothing my thumb around to get the shape that I want. Now the reason it's called a pinch pot is because when you have the shape you want, you can begin to pinch it at the sides. So that's half. Now I'm going to take the other half and I'm going to do exactly the same. Okay, so now I have my two, and they need to be about the same size so that when they go together, we're creating one sphere. And what I'm doing, of course, is I've added some slip. That's my clay and water, and I'm roughing up both edges before sticking them together. And it is so worth being bothered to do this. Don't skip the stick. If you skip the sticky bit, then you'll be in sticky trouble later because everything will fall apart. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick them together just by gently pressing those edges so that they meet. And you might think that I'm just going to smooth it over from there, but you wouldn't be quite right. I'm going to do something else first. Let's just leave that to one side. I'm going to make a coil. So for that, I'm going to use a little bit of my other bit of clay, which is over here. And I don't need a massive coil for this. It's not a big sphere. This doesn't need to be a perfect coil because I'm going to use it to stick those two halves together. Now I'm going to just soften it all off. And I'm going to use that to cover the join, and this will make sure that these two halves are not coming apart. Now, because I kept the width of my sphere to the width of my little finger, I can now do this with it. So that is now a hollow sphere and it's ready. for a project. Second method of making a sphere. So I have my other solid ball. This is solid clay, no holes in the middle, which means it takes much longer to dry, and it's a lot heavier for the project that you're making and not as versatile. So what I'm going to do is turn it into a hollow sphere with a hole in the middle to help it dry. And the way that I'm going to do this is a little bit different to the last one. So this one I'm going to leave it as a sphere, but I'm just going to tap it gently so that I've got a flat bit. And into that I'm going to start to press my thumb. And I'm going to go all the way around. So with this one, this method, you're only creating one pinch pot. And you'll notice that I've kept that hole reasonably small, and so that it's beginning to curl in on itself, and there is a good reason for that. Now you may find this method easier or harder than the last one. I wanted to show you both so that you could decide, and you can try both out to see which you find easier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to draw out these at the top, and eventually I'm going to bring them together. So I'm going to start just pulling up from underneath. I need to have slightly damp hands for this, just a little bit, not a lot. Remember, too much slip isn't good, makes it slippery. You drop your work, it's a mess, you can't work with it, and worst case scenario, it falls on the floor and is ruined and you have to start again. So what I'm doing is I'm just pulling this up, and I'm allowing these to get quite a bit thinner. Now what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to bring them together. So I'm going to allow them to overlap, and this will create cracks that you then join. Don't worry about that. Put it together a bit more and get them to overlap. And what I'm going to do is slowly but surely I'm going to narrow this hole together. I'm going to push in a bit. Oh, you can see now it's not easy to do this and get it right. And then I can begin to fill that hole. Make sure my fingers are. Just going to add a tiny bit of glue. I do want all of these bits to come together. Now, as that begins to cover over, I'm just going to use a tiny bit of this coil that was left over, and I'm just going to stick it on the top. And I'm going to use that so there's a bit more clay in the middle, because that's the weak spot in the middle where it's all pushed together. Now, you may have worked out that this method is a little bit faster than the other. It doesn't require a coil, although I did use a little bit of spare clay in the middle. And it also gets you a very useful hollow sphere that can then be used for all kinds of projects.